We want to talk about something that's kind of
Listen.
more related to what Brittany Griner has to deal with now, and that is the
I
issue of mental health.
I
And
look.
James, this is something that obviously I know you've been wanting to we've been wanting
You
to do this for a while. So I'm gonna give you the floor, and we're gonna start talking about this.
listen. I I will go ahead. I feel like this could be an episode on its own. I will go ahead and apologize in advance if emotions take over, because with this is something, like Shane said, this is something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. And I want to make sure, I hope that in the time remaining here that I can really get this point across. Um it I'm gonna take a very, very long approach to this. I hope I don't lose you. Please, y'all, if you've been here this long, just keep listening, because this is something that I feel is very important. I'm gonna step outside of sports, and I'm going to hit everybody with something that you clearly wouldn't know, but I feel that it helps make the point that I want to prove, and I know that Shane is right there with me. Um, so I want to rewind, like I said, we're recording this on December 26th. I want to rewind back about, about 2 weeks, about a week, about 2 weeks. And everybody listening to this, I'm sure you're familiar with Ellen DeGeneres, her DJ, dancer, Steven Twitch boss, who unfortunately chose to take his life on the evening of December 13th of this year. The news broke on December 14th. I saw the news while I was at work, sitting in my classroom, and it immediately struck a nerve with me, and I'm going to explain why. Now, his passing on the 13th and the release of the news on the 14th just coincided way too closely with the passing of my younger brother, Philip, who similarly chose to take his own life on December 16th of 2011. This year made 11 years since we lost him. And with Twitch passing only a few days before the anniversary of us losing my brother, that was a really tough week. And the reason that I wanted to do this, and I had been talking to Shane about it for a while, and he was very much on board, and that goes really back to the point of all of this. Is one of the main things that I made sure, like every year, to memorialize my brother at the end of the year, every year on December 16th, I always make a post on social media for him, just letting, to me, that's a way to let him know that I'm still thinking about him. I wish things could have been different, and as time has passed, I've started to understand that sometimes we don't always understand. Sometimes when people make those kind of choices, sometimes there's nothing you can do. And I'm honestly surprised that I'm still handling this the way that I am this far into this discussion. But it sometimes there's nothing you can do. And for me, this is a good deal of, I won't say closure, but it's kind of crossing over into a bigger deal of understanding. I not even to plug it, but if anybody decides to follow me on Facebook, you go look at the post that I made on December 16th of this year of 2022, you'll see I had to get lengthy, and I had to explain that for some reason, seeing this news about Twitch for this strange reason helped me to understand that sometimes we won't understand. And that's my very long-winded thing that I wanted to use to get into the way that mental health, and Shane talked about it a minute ago with everything with Brittany Griner. This is the way that I wanted to use to get into talking about mental health when it comes to professional athletes, specifically, of course, based on our podcast, mental health when it comes to professional basketball players. And one of the things that might be kind of hard to deal with, I can't even say that I understand, because I've never been a professional basketball player. I mean, I can level with you guys. I never even played in high school. I played in middle school, but other things took over. I mean, I've always been a lover of basketball for the longest, but I think that a lot of people have the misconception that once you make it to the league, once you make it to the pros, that life is great and everything is fine. And, earlier Shane mentioned that I had been wanting to do this for a while, and I did. And I'll touch on, the hiccups with that in a minute. But I'll say that originally where I wanted to do this, if you guys, and yes, I'm going to plug another outlet that we have nothing to do with because I feel like it's worth it. If you guys do not follow the outlet started by Derek Jeter after his retirement, it's called the Players Tribune. You need to go take a look at that. There was an article, basically, well, let me explain first. The Players Tribune, what Derek Jeter's doing is he talks to current and former athletes and gets them to craft pieces, whether they're through audio, video, or they sit down, write, their own columns just about their feelings and about, just they're allowed to be candid in what they want to do and how they feel. And back in September of this year, one of, honestly, my favorite players in the NBA, John Wall, formerly of the Washington Wizards, he wrote a piece for them that was entitled, "I'm Still Here." And if you're not familiar with John Wall, he details a lot of what he's gone through over the last 4 years or so of his own life. Notice I didn't say his career. I said his life. So while he's a member of the Washington Wizards, the team that drafted him, the team that he was loyal to, which everybody please understand, this is a business. The team was loyal to him. The team is giving him money. The team is paying him. He's working for them. He's doing everything he can. Around this time, about 4 years ago, he suffers an injury to his left heel. and he has to have surgery for this injury, which puts him on the shelf for an undisclosed amount of time. While he's at home recovering from this injury, he has an accident at home. The accident at home causes him to rupture his Achilles. Next thing you know, the team that drafted him, the team that he thought was going to do right by him, the reality check that everything is a business, he gets traded. He gets traded from the Washington Wizards to the Houston Rockets. Anybody that follows basketball knows that John Wall was the major piece of the trade that took Russell Westbrook from Houston to Washington. Less than a year later, he's ruled out for the rest of the season with another injury. This time it was to his hamstring. The following season, Houston decides to tell him, hey, man, stay home. It's cool. Stay home. Mutual decision. They're like, you just stay where you are. So think about this. You're a basketball player. You have been training to do this for a living from the time that you're old enough to dribble a basketball. And you get to the grandest stage. You make it to the National Basketball Association. And you end up on a team where they're like, you know what? Not only do we feel like we don't need you, we don't want you. Stay home. Another ego twist, another ego shock right there. So he stays home. On top of all this, he's having to deal with the fact that while he's recovering from his injury, he loses his best friend. He loses his mother to breast cancer. He's already had to deal with the fact that when he was 9 years old, the father that he barely knew, because he was in prison for most of his child upbringing, he finally gets out long enough to say goodbye to his son. He loses his father to liver cancer at 9 years old. If you go back and read, and I would urge everybody to go and read this piece. There's a reason he titled this piece, I'm Still Here. Because with everything that he had to go through, John Wall in this column, in this op-ed, he openly admits that he was ready to take his own life. And with the news of everything that happened with Twitch, combined with the anniversary of, thinking about what our family has dealt with my brother, I reached out to Shane again immediately, and I told him, I was like, yo, we have to do this. I was like, I know John Wall's article was a little while ago. There's been other stuff that's been going on. Even in the case, let's make it more contemporary. Let's talk about Zion Williamson. When he first came into the league, coming out of Duke, he was already dealing with injury, specifically lower body injuries. And a lot of people said, oh, he's not going to make it. Oh, he's too big. He's too fat. He's not an NBA player. With all the time that Zion was missing, he dealt with the ridicule. And think about it. Zion was drafted at 19 years old. And he's having to deal with all of this. Simply because you're brought into an NBA team, you're brought into a professional organization. All of a sudden now it's like you're supposed to flip things overnight, even though you came in injured. You came in injured. And the only thing that people can say is because you got drafted to New Orleans, they want to make jokes about seafood and crepes and beignets, and they want to do all of this and try to make light of the fact that you might be dealing with some things that you've never had to deal with either. Zion, found strength. We found out later through interviews. He found strength through one of his assistant coaches. I swear I want to go back to the Women's Hall of Fame, Teresa Weatherspoon, who he leaned on. And she even said, she was like, I'm not going to him and I'm not talking about how's your leg doing or how's how's your training going and this and this and that. She said, every time I saw him, I looked at him and I was like, how are you? How are things going with you? And I feel like it's really frustrating. And I think it's an easy segue right now, as such a big fan of basketball. It's an easy segue to make, because even though, do I have the build of an NBA player? Absolutely not. Do I love the game? You better believe it. But it's so easy, the same way that children can look at NBA players and idolize them and want to be them. When you get to be my age or you get to be Shane's age, we may not necessarily idolize these players because we've learned more than that. We can respect them, we can appreciate them, we can be fans of them, but idolatry, that's fallen short at this point. We know better. But we can relate to them in a sense, not necessarily from the stardom, but from the idea of, and I'm going to say it, having to deal with the pressure of being a Black man. And that was the point that I was trying to get to with all of this, is I don't have all the answers to any of this, but I do want to make sure that everybody that is actually still taking the time to listen to this, I want to say thank you. I appreciate you. I'm sure Shane is going to chime in. I mean, he's shout out to my dude, brother. I love you. He's giving me the time to go on this rant right now because he knows how I feel. To everybody that's still taking the time to listen, mental health is real. And I think that everybody needs to take the time to really pay attention to what's going on around you. There's all these memes and all these, posts on Facebook that say, check on your strong friends and do this and do that. That is the absolute truth. Check on your friends. You never know. You never know what's going on. You never know what could possibly happen. And for both of us as basketball lovers, I mean, as soon as I saw the John Wall story on the Players Tribune, first person I hit up was my best friend. And I was like, bro, did you see this? and almost like it almost immediately he texted me back and was like, absolutely. Everybody needs somebody to talk to. I don't know any other way to say mental health is real, and it's something that really, really needs to be paid attention to. And it can't be at a point where we're looking in retrospect. It can't be the kind of thing where we're like, oh man, I saw these signs. I had a feeling this was happening. No, if you have a feeling it's happening, do something. Do something. Because I would much rather be the person that steps out on that ledge and puts an arm over a person's shoulder than to be standing at a funeral talking about that's what I wish I had done. There's way too many things going on in our country, in our world, in our lives, period. If you can help somebody, do it. It doesn't always take money. Something as simple as a hug. Something as simple as walking up to somebody and telling them they're doing a good job. Everybody assumes that these NBA players, because they're making millions of dollars, they're on top of the world and everything is fine. Why is that the case? Because they have money? Plenty of millionaires commit suicide. Plenty of people with money decide that there's something on this earth that might be bad enough for them to not want to be here anymore. Those things have to be talked about. And I think, and like I said, I'm going to take a time to relate it specifically to the hosts of this show. I'm going to relate it specifically to Black men because I feel like there's a different level of expectation that's placed on us. And I think that sometimes that expectation, I don't know if I want to say it's unfair, but a lot of times a lot of Black men are unprepared. It takes a village. Sometimes we're taught that you shouldn't show emotion. You're bigger than this. You're better than this. You're stronger than this. Oh, you're so-and-so. You should be okay. You know, everything
you can't
is
cry.
You can't cry. Thank you, Shane. Thank you. You can't cry. What are you crying for? You're this, you're that. You don't cry. We don't cry.
That's weak.
Though, yeah. Those emotion is a sign of weakness. Emotion is a sign of weakness. So we go through life being these cold-hearted individuals because we're taught that we're not supposed to show those things. And then it gets to a point where when it bubbles up and it swells up inside of you and you don't have anyone to show it to, it's not because nobody wants to hear it. It's simply out of fear. It's out of a feeling of, who can I show this to when my entire life I've been taught that I'm not supposed to.
Right.
It's painful. And like I said, I can only imagine. I've never played in the NBA. The closest I've gotten to the NBA is probably sitting in the nosebleeds at a game. But the one way I can relate to a majority of those guys on the floor is that we're all Black men. To them, I think it's even worse because they've had to bottle so many things in to be successful on the level that they are. Who have they ever unloaded to? Who have they ever unleashed to? When you get to a point where John Wall said in his piece, he says, when Washington decided to trade me, I felt like I was losing everything that I had worked for in my life. And I reached a decision, especially after I lost my mother. And then within a few months, he also lost his grandmother. He said he reached a decision. He was like, what else is there for me? He lost his best friend, the person that he always confided in, which lets you know that as much time as he had already spent in the NBA, he never felt that comfort with anybody else, which that's no knock on the NBA because nobody's ever going to feel the comfort that they feel with their mother. But at the same time, if you've been with an organization this long that feeds you this much hope, and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, bye. How does that make you feel if you were their number one pick just a few years prior? There's emotions that go into that you don't have anybody to discuss them with. And like I said, the most recent iteration of that is Zion Williamson. And I want to make sure anybody that happens to hear this in New Orleans, make sure Zion hears this so that we can let Zion know, hey, the way that you were feeling, the host of this show, we hear you. And you are justified in the way that you felt because you didn't have anybody to talk to. You had to tackle the world at 19 years old. And you were expected to be perfect just because you had been blessed enough to show something close to perfection before you crossed that NBA draft stage. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. You worked your ass off to get to where you were. Injuries happen. And it just so happened that your injuries came at the most inconvenient time to where now you're being looked at as a failure simply because your body decided to do something different. But in that case, who was there for him? Coaches might have said they were. Teammates might have said they were. They did everything they could. But nobody always has the answers. And
this isn't 2K.
Right. This
I
ain't a video
that.
game. This ain't a video game. Like,
you can trade people, you can move people to different teams, you can do all these things. In real life, these are real people with real issues. These are people that have families. Some folks, they have, whether they've created their own family or whether they have people that have raised them and are supporting them while they're in the NBA. These are adults.
Right.
These are people that go through a lot of the same stuff we go through. Just because you have, in John Wall's case, $40-something million.
Right.
This is still a guy who feels pain and felt betrayed by the team that drafted him and has dealt with the real pain and grief of losing loved ones. Right. Like, this is important. These are important issues. I've lost loved ones.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard. I lost my mother and I lost my great aunt that raised me within a span of 3 years.
Yeah.
And I had to deal with that. I lost my mom at 22.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, no, I wasn't even 22 yet. I was 21. I was I was a few months away from my 22nd birthday.
And it's like, how do you, like I said, even on our scale, like, how do you deal with those things?
Yeah.
Like, how it's unfair to assume that everybody that walks around with a smile is doing fine.
Right. And and money is nothing when it comes to that. Money doesn't mean anything. If anything, the money, if people don't have the proper coping mechanisms, the money becomes the worst thing.
It's even worse. Yeah.
Back in June, in my job, right here in Valdosta, I got a chance to go to a mental health symposium. Among the people there, former Dallas Cowboys quarterback Quincy Carter.
Yeah.
Quincy Carter went to the University of Georgia.
Yep.
He was the quarterback of America's team, Dallas Cowboys.
Yep.
Literally got cut because he failed a drug test in training camp. His whole life was in shambles. You're sitting there thinking, as a fan, it's like, we don't see all that. All we see is them in uniform on game day.
Right.
You don't see the fact that they're dealing with all kinds of vices and all these things because they're trying to cope with the pressures of being who they are.
Right.
Think about that. Like, Quincy Carter, you just came into a situation where you're about to be the quarterback of the Dallas freaking Cowboys. Think about that. America's team. You're the quarterback of Dallas Cowboys. That's like being the shortstop for the New York Yankees. That's being the point guard for the Lakers. That's being the top wing for the Boston Celtics. That's a lot of pressure that comes with that.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people that spend money to go watch you play. There's a lot of people that want to watch you play, want to support this team, whatever. You're being seen by millions of people all over the world. There's a lot of pressure that goes into that. You have to perform in front of all these people. And not everybody has the ability to cope. They can't shut off their emotions. They can't deal with all the problems that can come with that thing. You got injuries when you talk about pro sports. You got injuries. You got your own personal life outside the lines. There's so many things that go into that situation, and not everybody is built to handle it. We talked about Zion. We talked about John Wall. Recently, Tyrell Terry. I can speak to this as a Mavericks fan.
I wanted you to bring him up. Go ahead.
Tyrell Terry retired at age 22, a few weeks ago? Last week? And so Tyrell Terry, 22 years old, announced his retirement recently. Tyrell was drafted 31st overall by my Dallas Mavericks back in 2020 out of Stanford. Tyrell Terry, not a big guy, 6'2", 160, kind of a Steph Curry light if we're talking about player comps. Never really got off the ground. His first year in Dallas, most of his career in Dallas, he only played 2 seasons in the NBA. And he's retired now. He played just 13 games in the NBA, 11 for Dallas, 2 for Memphis. He was waived by Memphis back in July. Before that, he was cut by the Mavericks last October. He only played 59 minutes in the NBA. And you're wondering, okay, he's 22. Why is he retiring? Because of mental health. He took to Instagram, social media, with the following message. He said, "This message is a very difficult one to share and an emotional one to write. Today, I decided to let go of the game that has formed a large part of my identity, something that has guided my path since I took my first steps. While I have achieved amazing accomplishments, created unforgettable memories, and made lifelong friends, I've also experienced the darkest times of my life, to the point where instead of building me up, it began to destroy me, where I began to despise and question the value of myself much more than those surrounding me could ever see or know. Intrusive thoughts, waking up nauseous, and finding myself struggling to take normal breaths because of the rock that would sit on my chest that seemed to weigh more than I could carry. This is just a brief description of the anxiety this sport has caused me, and while I'm grateful for every door it has opened for me, I can't continue this fight any longer for something I have fallen out of love with. To most, I will forever be known as a bust, a failure, or a waste of talent. While those may be true when it comes to basketball, it is the biggest failures in life that lead to the greatest successes. There is more for me out in this vast world, and I'm extremely excited to be able to explore that, and for the first time to be able to find my identity outside of being a basketball player. I am eternally grateful to those who have believed in me and apologize to those I have let down. But I'm headed down a different path now, one that will hopefully lead to happiness and being able to love myself again." Now, this is a person that was drafted into the NBA by a team that, since 2000 has been a very successful franchise. And it's his opportunity to make it to the big league. He only played 1 year at Stanford. He was a good player at Stanford, averaged about 15 points a game. Shot the ball really well, one of the best shooters in the draft, arguably the best shooter in the 2020 draft. And what you hear there is not that I don't have the ability. It's there's a weight that he felt every time he tried to suit up. Most of his time in Dallas, he spent extended time away from Dallas. I mean, you had the pandemic, you had all kinds of things going on when he was drafted. And he's letting you know, like, even though I was drafted to the NBA, this is supposed to be the happiest and most fruitful time of my life. I was not happy. I was the complete opposite. I was anxious. I couldn't sleep. I wake up nauseous. I can't breathe normally because of this crippling anxiety that he had.
Right.
And like, it takes courage to do what Tyrell Terry did. It takes courage to walk away, because everything in this situation would say, you can't do that. That's weak.
Right.
You can't. Who retires at 22? You can't do that.
Nothing's wrong with you.
You man up.
You've got the whole world at your feet. Nothing's wrong with you.
And the fact that Tyrell Terry at 22 years old says, this ain't for me. While I was a good basketball player and I was good enough to be drafted in the NBA, this ain't for me. Right. He chose his own health over what was supposed to be his career
that he worked his entire life for.
Right. It's been his life to this point.
It's very
Think
rare.
About it.
It's very rare that you have somebody pick up a basketball at 16, 17 years old and make it to the pros. This ain't something that you do overnight.
Think about it. He just put down the very thing that got him into Stanford.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you got to be smart. You got to be smart. But if you're going to get a basketball scholarship, you got to be damn good too. Played 29 games in the G League across 2 seasons with the Memphis Hustle. 13 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. 13 games in the NBA. Like I said, 59 minutes. Not even an hour in the NBA. He was willing to let it go because mentally it just wasn't for him anymore. The anxiety was too much. Me as a fan, I'm just like, man, I can't wait to see what we got in Tyrell Terry. They keep saying he's away for personal reasons. It never said it was mental health. It never said anything. It just said he's away from the team. He's dealing with some stuff. I would rather, and I think the overarching thing that we're pushing here is these conversations that we're having are why guys like Tyrell Terry can have that courage to say, this isn't for me mentally. I gotta step away. You don't want to become, like we see it all the time. We see it in other athletic professions. Look at pro wrestlers.
These conversations need to be had more often.
Right. And that's why it's great that we can hear about Tyrell Terry saying, because of my anxiety and these things, I'm putting down the thing I've dedicated my life to. I would much rather hear that than Tyrell Terry drug overdose at 22.
Yeah.
Suicide 22. I'd much rather hear, I understand that I have a problem and my problems outweigh this profession and I can't perform at the level I want to perform at. I have to be able, and mental health is such that anything, and we see this all the time. Everybody's probably seen this quote on their social media if they follow enough people. Anything that costs you your peace is too expensive. Basketball may have afforded this man everything he could have ever wanted in life. But if you're not happy, how you gonna win when you ain't right within? Shout out to Lauryn Hill. It don't matter how much money you got. It doesn't matter what car you drive. It doesn't matter how big your house is. As my uncle used to tell me, we all got a reservation to some hole in the ground without the privilege of cancellation. We all gonna die one day. But as black men, other people, it's not even just black men, but we talked about mostly black men, white guys, Asian, whoever, white women, black women.
No, yeah. And on that, I want to make sure everybody that's listening, when we talk about black men, this is in no way to separate us or to separate this podcast from anybody listening. There's no exclusion. We're simply mentioning black men because that is who we are. The two co-hosts of this podcast are two 30-something-year-old black men, and we're simply speaking on our experiences. We're not saying any of this to isolate ourselves or alienate any other group on this planet.
Right.
So if you're listening, this applies to everyone.
Everybody has something they're dealing with.
Yes, we're just speaking on it from our perspective. So so when you hear this, you're listening to our voices, you're listening to our minds, you're listening to our hearts right now. This is how we feel.
This is our perspective.
This is us expressing our perspectives. So do not take this as division. Do not take it as isolation. Do not take it as alienation. We are simply trying to make it clear to everyone that regardless of where you are, regardless of how you feel, somebody is willing to listen and take the opportunity. And to somebody that may not be going through something, this is a challenge to you too. Go out and find somebody that needs someone to talk to, because you never know the life that you can save. Go out and ask somebody how they're doing. And one of my close friends actually said this to me the other day. She was like, don't be afraid to ask somebody how they're doing. And if they say that they're doing okay, but you can look them in the face and you can tell that they're not, don't be afraid to call them out on that. Because a lot of times when we have, a lot of people want to say, check on your strong friends. A lot of times those people appear strong because they're not afraid to admit that there's something wrong. The strong friends are the ones that we tend to lose, because they don't want to admit to anybody that they're struggling, and they're struggling all along.
Right. And some people, we're not even talking about necessarily like suicide necessarily with all of it. Right. Look at Chadwick Boseman.
Mm-hmm.
Chadwick Boseman was dealing with very serious terminal cancer, eventually took his life.
Yeah.
And not once did he want to make it about him. We saw how much weight he had lost, and people made memes about it.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's the society we live in. Something happens, and rather than going, man, that's kind of weird, what's going on, we make memes about it. Everything's a joke. Then he dies, and everybody's like, oh my God, Chadwick Boseman. Like, it's sad. It's when Zion, when somebody takes a picture of Zion out in public and he looks heavy, it's, he been dunking the beignets. And it's about his weight. Think about how it is in not even looking at pro athletes. Look at how it is with people that grow up with eating disorders or grow up overweight, and they get teased about their weight. It's like, you don't think that hurts a guy like Zion? He's human too.
Right. Especially when not only is the weight a thing, but he's also been dealing with injuries related to the sport that he has grown up loving to play.
Right. Think about how much that has to suck. Right? Like you're a top pick, you're expected to be this generational talent and it's mainly because of your body. Yeah. He can do things in his body that not many people can do. That dude's the size of a defensive tackle in the NFL.
Right.
He shouldn't be able to do the things he does on a basketball court.
We haven't seen elevation of somebody his size since like Sean Kemp.
Sean Kemp, exactly. And it's insane that he can do the things he does on the court. But that's one of the things that kind of sucks about being a pro athlete. Your body is what gets you paid. It's what affords you all the things that you get. But once that breaks down, then what? You might have your money, but you can't play that game anymore. We talked about Dirk Nowitzki earlier in this pod. Dirk Nowitzki is on record saying like he wishes he had retired a couple years earlier because his left ankle is so bad that he can't even, it's still not right. He still walks with a limp today.
Yeah.
Because his body broke down. He literally gave his body to his profession.
He made the joke just at the statue unveiling yesterday. He was like, where he was talking about LeBron. He said, like, it's amazing to see what LeBron is doing at this point in his career. He said, and then Dirk actually took a pot shot at himself, and he said, by year 20, man, my teammates were rolling me up and down the court in a wheelbarrow.
Exactly. I mean, it's like there's a lot of, there's mental health applies to everything. Like it's got to suck when you're a multi-time all-star, you're NBA champion, you've accomplished all these things. And at the end of the day, you got 3 kids and a wife, and you got a family. He can't run and play with his kids because his ankle is so bad because of this profession that he chose to dedicate himself to. It's got to suck. Like thinking about Dirk's journey, thinking about Kobe's journey. We all seen the pictures. Kobe covered in ice on the sideline his last year. Dirk, they said there were needles that were like 6-8 inches long that they would have to stick in his joints to get him ready to play.
Look, you're talking about Kobe. You said last year. You made that sound singular.
It's like they go through a lot already. And we don't know half of what people dealt with personally. And so it's like what we're saying is if you are going through something, don't be afraid to talk to anybody. If you are, it's one of those things. It's like I said, if you're going through something, don't be afraid to talk.
And on that, like I said, I want to I'm not even going to call this a shameless plug because this is something, if you've been listening this far, I want you to hear it. 1-800-273-8255. I'm going to say that again. 1-800-273-8255. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline. I want to make sure that everybody is familiar with that number because, like I said, I don't want anybody listening, if you've never dealt with it, I do not want anybody to deal with the emotions that I have personally had to deal with for the last 11 years. I don't. It's a lot of confusion. It's a lot of anger. It's a lot of sadness. And that mixture, you don't want it. I don't want you to have to deal with it. I don't want you to leave loved ones dealing with it. It's not fair to them. And it's not fair to you. Speak to somebody. There's always somebody out there willing to listen. There's always somebody out there willing to help. Also, simply pick up the phone and dial 988. That is the number for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Even if you're not necessarily considering or contemplating suicide, if you have something traumatic going on in your life, there's somebody on the other end of that phone, somebody on the other end of that line willing to listen to you. Suicidal crisis, emotional distress, even if it's not you, even if you're afraid that there's somebody in your circle or in your family that might be contemplating those kind of things, You might be an outsider that has never considered that. Pick up the phone and dial that number anyway, because there's also people on the other end that are willing to try to help you find ways to reach that loved one. Do not be afraid. It is much better in this situation to be proactive than reactive. If you are in a position where you can do that, do it. Please do it. I don't know who this message is going to reach. I just pray that it reaches somebody. If you're ever in question, if you're ever in doubt, do it.
As a society, this is all I'm going to say. We live in this social media thing where everybody wants to troll. Everybody's got something to say. I want everybody to marinate on this. Less judgment, more empathy. Less vitriol, more understanding. If you've made it this far, thank you for making JWJ a part of your day. If you're not already, make sure you follow us, like, and subscribe for our new episodes. We can be found on almost every platform. We're on Anchor, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, and more. We can also be found on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can follow us at the JWJ Podcast. You can also follow us individually, myself at It's a Thomas Thing, and James at Title Towns Mayor. If you have any questions, would like to add your 2 cents, shoot us an email at the jwjpodcast@gmail.com for the chance to be included in a future episode. Thank you guys for listening. Until next time, thanks again for your support. Thank you for tuning in to JWJ.